Welcome to The Unconventional Path, Secrets to Igniting Your Business with Bela and Mike mini episode. These mini episodes will be released every other week to supplement our full episodes where we interview guests.
In these mini episodes, we'll discuss a topic of general interest, we hope, to our listeners, and answer listener questions. These mini episodes will typically be 5 to 10 minutes in length. So if you want your question answered on the air, please send it to us at bela.and.mike@gmail.com.
As always, we appreciate your comments and suggestions, and we hope you enjoy these mini episodes. Hello, folks. Bela here. We have a listener question this week, Mike. This is great. So Andy asked the question, Andy from Providence, Rhode Island, asked the question, how do I know if VC funding is right for me? So the general topic here is raising capital and how do I raise capital or how should I raise capital? But specifically, Andy asked about venture capital and is it right for me? So Mike, when you talk to your students or you talk to other folks that you interact with about raising capital, let's just take the larger topic first. How do you talk to them about sort of this notion of raising capital and the various different forms it comes in?
Well, I start with the basics, and I like to talk about borrowing money, debt, versus getting money invested into your company, equity. So I really start simple. And what's the difference between needing to pay somebody back at a fixed rate of interest in a fixed amount of time versus somebody investing money in you and you cede control and you have to share profits. And if the company eventually gets bought, that person has to gets part of the proceeds, and you have to consult with that person. You have a fiduciary duty, right, to consult with that person on major business impacts. So I start there, Bela. And then if I drill down into the VC world, I usually look to you for your expertise.
Yeah. So I will say one thing. The very first thing I always talk to folks when they talk about raising capital is I say the best way to raise capital is to sell your product to customers. Figure out how to make something and figure out how to get your customers to buy it. And there's a couple of added benefits to that besides getting that money. One is you're interacting with your customers. You're spending your time with your customers and not with a loan officer at a bank, not with a venture capitalist, but you're actually doing things that are moving your business forward. Now, for some businesses that works because there's not a lot of needs. You don't need a large amount of capital to get going. For businesses where there are needs for large amounts of capital, there are sort of two categories that I think about. There are non-dilutive types of capital, which would be debt, getting a loan from your parents, getting a loan from your uncle, getting a loan from the bank. Kickstarter is another interesting way to do this, right? People fundamentally are placing advanced orders for your product. So that fits for certain types of businesses. And then the third one, the other category, general category, are dilutive, meaning you're going to get diluted, meaning someone else is going to own a piece of your business. So equity financing falls into that category. And whether people make an investment in your company in exchange for shares of stock, that's fundamentally what a venture capitalist does. Now let's get to Andy's specific question. Is venture capital right for me? One of the interesting things about venture capital is that it funds a very small percentage, i.e. single digits, of all the companies that get started in this country or around the world for that matter. And that's because you have to fit into a certain framework for it to work within venture capital. Number one, the company needs to be big enough that someone else is fundamentally going to want to buy that business, or it's going to be large enough to have an IPO. So there's certain types of businesses that just doesn't happen in. They don't get acquired. So that's number one. Number two is as an entrepreneur, there's this 51% fallacy that I talk to students about. Just because you own 51% or greater of your company doesn't mean you have control. because private equity or venture capitalists buy preferred shares of stock. And what that means is their ownership comes along with some additional rights and privileges. So they're going to have some control over your business that is disproportionate to the percentage of ownership that they have. So to me, those are a couple of big things that you want to deal with. And the biggest is the first one I mentioned, which is at some point in time, if you take money from a venture capitalist, there will be a liquidity event. A liquidity event means that your company's going to be sold to someone else. And the VCs are going to force that to happen because as a shareholder in a company, that's how you make your money. VCs are not interested in a dividend. They are interested in buying shares for, let's say, $1 and selling them at some point in the future for $10 a share. So that's, I think, sort of in a nutshell, how I think about it, how I talk to folks about it. But I want to just reemphasize the first point I made, which is the absolute best way to raise capital for your business is by selling your product.
Great, Bela. I hope that answers Andy's question. If not, I'm sure we'll hear from Andy. And a follow-up is, of course, always invited. But if you have questions that you'd like us to answer on the air, please email us at bela.and.mike@gmail.com. I think that'll wrap it up for today in this mini podcast on raising capital. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.
This podcast is produced for Mike and I by our friends at Busy Media of Schenectady, New York. They can be found at busymedia.co.